Senator Whitehouse, I think you want to make a statement.
I'd be delighted to. First, let me thank you, Chairman Graham, for holding this hearing. We've been working on this for a long time, and I appreciate very much your patience and persistence and your attention to the rising threat that kleptocracy poses to our country. I also want to particularly thank Senator Grassley, who has been my compadre on the title bill for a long time, back when he was chairman, and now as chairman of finance. He has another terrific position to push for clarity and transparency in this area. And I think between Chairman Grassley in finance and Chairman Graham in Judiciary, we've got a really great opportunity here. America's democratic institutions and our commitment to the rule of law have long stood as an example and an inspiration to those in far corners of the globe chafing under authoritarian rule. As President Clinton once said, the power of our example matters more than any example of our power. Countries such as the United States are founded on respect for the inviolable rights of the individual and governed by the rule of law. In other countries, it's different. State power is concentrated in the hands of a single person or ruling clique, accountable only to itself, oiled by corruption, and dedicated to looting the country's citizens and domestic resources. In this new clash of values, the United States is not living up to its reputation as a city on a hill. America too often enables global corruption by allowing the looters the shelter of our rule of law for their ill-gotten gains. With every passing day, we learn more about how Russia and Russian kleptocrats exploit opaque business laws in the rule of law world to hide illicit riches, bribe corrupt officials, undermine the world's economy, and degrade democratic institutions. Heather Connolly at the Center for Strategic and International Studies wrote in her report, The Kremlin Playbook, that corruption is the lubricant with which the Russians operate. CSIS warns that, and I quote, enhancing transparency and the effectiveness of the Western democratic tools, instruments, and institutions is critical. As the Panama Papers revealed, however, American institutions are now a facilitator in this racket. Rather than demand transparency and push corrupt actors back to their dark corners, whole industries, American law firms, realtors, shell corporations, and financial services companies cater to international crooks and kleptocrats. This is a blot on American capitalism, a blot on our democratic system, and a blot on the rule of law. And make no mistake, this is a national security issue. I'll offer the piece that General and former CIA Director David Petraeus and I wrote in the Washington Post. I think that our chairman will agree that he has some credibility in the area of national security.
Without objection, and very much agree.
If you live in a country robbed blind by crooked rulers, it is hard not to resent a country that helped them get away with the loot. Justly earned discredit will fall on the institutions, capitalism and democracy, if they fail in the face of these well-known evils. It's actually worse than just that. Not only can kleptocrats use American shell companies to protect their ill-gotten gains and engage in money laundering, bribery, and other offenses, they can use shell companies to directly influence American elections. For instance, we had Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg here to testify about foreign influence campaigns as they relate to his company. He related, right here in this room, that even under Facebook's new ad disclosure measures, if a Russian operative were to advertise on Facebook through a US chartered shell corporation, Facebook would run the ad without tracing its true source. Boris and Natasha LLC is where the investigation stops into who is funding political ads. Quite simply, Vladimir Putin and his ilk can use dark money channels to wield influence in American elections. Wherever America allows dark money influence into our politics, we leave an open channel and an open invitation to foreign interference. That may be a fact that certain American special interests don't like, but it's still a fact, and it's a fact that has national security implications. One simple measure to harden our legal system against this abuse would be to require corporate entities to truly report and update their beneficial ownership information. I've been proud to work with Senator Grassley and Senator Feinstein on the Title Act, which does just that. Transparency to shell corporations is not a novel idea. It's the coming thing around the world. The United Kingdom has already implemented its own transparency laws. In the EU, the light of transparency is about to shine on criminal assets hidden in European shell companies, all of which means that money will be looking for new dark homes, and America must not become that new dark home. America has long stood before the world as an exceptional country. And America's exceptional nature confers upon us responsibilities. It is not a burden to bear those responsibilities. It is an asset that we command. But we have to earn that asset by living our values. So thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing and pushing forward to make sure that American values are at the forefront of our posture. Thank you, Chairman Graham. Let me start with just a couple of thank yous. First of all, the Trump administration Treasury Department has been very helpful at pushing this forward and continues to lean in a variety of ways, so I want to express my appreciation to Treasury. I want to thank the Hudson Institute, who is not testifying here today, but has been a very powerful force in this cause, and I'd like to offer an editorial written by Ken Weinstein called America Must Combat Illicit Finance in the Hill as an exhibit without objection. The Washington Post has written a very good piece on it as well. I'd like to offer as an exhibit. And just for the record, let me say I actually would support, I disagree with Mr. Zubin a little bit, I'd actually support a public registry the way that the UK has done, but let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's do what we can because this is a real bleeding sore as far as I'm concerned. And if it takes having a confidential record, I'm for that. Let's get this wound healing. Dr. Fuller, you said that the anonymous shell companies create, in your words, unnecessary risks to our markets. Could you expand a little bit on what you mean by that?
Yes, there's so many different places to begin. One that I could have added on to the chairman's question as well was our foreign trade zones around the world are one area where the Chinese are taking advantage of free markets around the world. And here where it's a geographically specific area that we could target and look at and sanction if we identify the worst ones around the world. But to your specific question over how it introduces these risks, there are shell companies outbidding legitimate American companies in DoD contracts for arming our troops around the world. And these anonymous shell companies that are money laundering vehicles do not seek a profit. They're just there to move money and to clean it and to put it out. So that creates unfair competition for legitimate American small businesses that are working for a profit and competing on a level playing field.
If you don't mind, in a question for the record, I don't want you to do it right now, but if you could write down some of the examples of that behavior through DoD, I think that would be very useful for my colleagues to see. I'd appreciate that. Ms. Krumholtz, you talked about the danger of foreign dark money interfering in our elections. And my question to you is, if you're a foreign influencer and you see that you have a path to hide who you are and spend money to influence an election, is it necessary for you to actually spend that money to have influence? Or have you been empowered by that capability to be able to go to a candidate or a political entity of some kind and make threats or promises that would have influence and effect without you even having to spend the money?
Absolutely. I think it is logical to assume that credible threats would be received just as seriously as actually spending the money. So that could have
And the anonymity is what makes the threat credible.
precisely. And
So
also
there are
the
two
notion.
levels of darkness here. One is you see money flowing into politics from, I'm making this up, of course, Boris and Natasha LLC, and nobody knows who that really is. And so the darkness hits at the corporate shell level, but whoever's behind Boris and Natasha LLC could equally have said to whoever the ultimate recipient was, hey, we're going to do this unless you clean up. And then you never even see the dark transaction. Then it's totally obscured, is it not?
Exactly. And there have been conversations like this about the infiltration of anonymous money into our political system for many years, focusing on the notion that people are swayed by threats they perceive to be credible.
So there's a zone of danger of political interference around the spending beyond just the spending itself because of the threats, the cajoling that it permits.
Yes.
What do you believe are the chances that the ultimate recipient of dark money spending actually knows who the donor is? What are the chances that the donor is not in any way going to come forward to the recipient and say, hey, that $2 million that came through Boris and Natasha LLC, that was me, we got to work together?
Here again, I think it is logical to expect that many of the beneficiaries of dark money spending are aware of the original source of the money, unlike the press and public and their opponents.
So in a nutshell, the donor knows and the recipient knows and nobody else knows.
Correct.
Thank you. My time has expired.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Our chairman has returned, so let me return to him. I would point out one thing, if I may, and that is that behind one shell corporation, you might not find the true party. You might find another shell corporation. You can have nesting dolls of shell corporation behind shell corporation behind shell corporation, and the easier it is to get the information about each shell corporation, and the more you require in terms of actual disclosure up front, the less that becomes a successful tool for these evil forces to defend themselves from law enforcement, taxation, accountability to their countries, whatever. You can really dial up the difficulty of this if you're a bad guy by stacking the shell companies. I see all heads nodding, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.